Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are looking at a piece of lore that genuinely, well, it just stopped me in my tracks.
I'm really glad we're tackling this one. It's a heavy one, but it's incredible.
It really is. And if you've spent, any time exploring the wildly imaginative universe of dystopia, you already know it's a place where the literal landscape is shaped by the emotional and psychological states of its inhabitants.
Right, it's highly reactive.
Exactly. We are talking about a realm where thought becomes matter, where ancient microbes traverse the cosmos on floating rocks to seed new life, and where every mountain, valley, and forest hides this epic saga of survival and evolution.
It's a massive scale. Cosmic, really.
It is, but we aren't doing a broad, high-level overview today. We're zeroing in on a highly specific, incredibly intimate narrative arc that unfolds within this massive universe.
Which is often where the best stories in this lore are found.
Completely agree. Our mission today is to trace the intertwined journey of three fascinating figures. We've got a cowardly spellcaster known as Edward Zipper, a resilient blind knight named Sir J STR, and a miraculous shape-shifting white raven crow.
It is such a remarkable narrative. What makes it so compelling to me is how it takes the sweeping cosmic themes of the dystopia universe and compresses them into a deeply personal, character-driven saga.
Yeah, it gets really granular.
It does. We get this visceral, almost surgical look at the mechanics of magical theft. We see the psychological fragility of those who choose to exploit others, and conversely, we witness the incredible transformative power of trauma when it is channeled into protection rather than despair.
And I have to warn you, the imagery we are going to explore today is vivid. It's sometimes brutal, and it's deeply symbolic.
Very much so.
I mean, we are talking about stolen magic, literally ripping the visual spectrum of color off a living creature. We're going to examine the hollow nature of true cowardice, embodied by a villain who wears power like a borrowed coat.
A very heavy coat, as we'll find out.
Oh, absolutely. And ultimately, we are building toward this triumphant, literal dive into the thickest, foulest muck imaginable in order to reclaim one's true, radiant colors. It is a story about identity, theft, and the messy, glorious process of taking back what belongs to you.
It's a perfect distillation of the hero's journey, but twisted in that unique dystopia way.
And to help unpack the psychological and thematic depths of this journey, I'm joined by my favorite analytical mind, someone who has an incredible knack for extracting the profound human truths hidden within these mythical landscapes.
Thank you. I'm very much looking forward to exploring this. The material challenges us to look at the anatomy of evil, not as this grand, all-powerful, unstoppable force, but as something quite fragile.
Frail, almost.
Yes, fragile, deeply opportunistic, and ultimately self-defeating. And it shows us how innocence, even when violated in most horrific ways, retains an unbreakable core of power.
Okay, let's unpack this. We need to start right at the beginning of this intertwined tragedy with the origin of our villain's power, or rather, his complete lack thereof.
Right, because he doesn't start with much.
Nothing at all. We have to look at the horrific night in a place called Brassingtown. Now, Brassingtown is fascinating in its own right. It's a town that lives by a very specific creed.
The harm none creed.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. If it harms none, do what you will. It's a place of profound peace, nestled among lush green mountains and protected by a grand castle made entirely of white stone. It's essentially a utopian pocket within the dystopia universe.
That creed is essential context. If it harms none, do what you will, is a philosophy of total non-aggression. It fosters a society built on trust, openness, and mutual respect.
Which sounds perfect on paper.
It does, but the inherent vulnerability of a society that operates strictly on good faith is that it is completely unequipped to deal with a bad faith actor.
They just don't see it coming.
They can't. When your entire worldview assumes that others will also harm none, you leave your doors unlocked, metaphorically and sometimes literally. You create a fertile hunting ground for a predator who doesn't play by those rules.
And that vulnerability is exactly what gets exploited. So within this peaceful setting, a blacksmith and a royal maid have just welcomed a newborn baby boy. It's the eve before his name-giving ceremony.
A moment of pure innocence.
Pure innocence. The baby is tucked into his crib, sleeping peacefully, a silent smile on his face. The parents have just given him a final kiss goodnight. They retreat backward out of the room and they close the heavy wooden door. It is a picture of absolute domestic perfection.
But then it shifts.
Violently. The absolute silence of the night is shattered because the parents hear their baby squealing. And it's not just a hungry cry or a fussy cry. It is a primal, visceral scream of terror and acute pain.
The transition from that total domestic tranquility to absolute horror is incredibly abrupt. And that abruptness mirrors Edward Zipper's entire methodology.
He doesn't give a warning.
He doesn't announce his presence at all. He doesn't wage a war. He infiltrates spaces of presumed ultimate safety. He strikes when the defenses are completely down, specifically targeting the moments of deepest rest.
So the parents hear this horrific screaming, and they panic, understandably. They rush down the hall to their baby's room, but when they get there, they can't get in.
The door is stuck.
The thick, heavy wooden door is mysteriously stuck. It has literally swollen inside its frame, wedged impossibly tight by some unseen dark magic. The father is throwing his shoulder against the door, banging it again and again, totally frantic.
It's a nightmare scenario.
And from the other side, through that thick, swollen wood, they hear the chilling sound of massive wings flapping and a crow crying out, "Car, car, car, car." It's a terrifying auditory cue that builds the dread before they even see what's happening.
The swollen door is such a brilliant physical manifestation of Zipper's magic. It creates barriers. It isolates the victim. He takes the natural environment, the wood of the home, which is supposed to be a symbol of shelter and safety, and twists it into an obstacle against rescue. He weaponizes the home against the parents.
Wow, yes. The parents, fueled by pure adrenaline, finally manage to burst the door open. They shatter the frame and rush in, and the reveal is just shocking.
It's gruesome.
They burst in to find a massive, dark black crow hovering right over their newborn's crib. But here's the detail that truly elevates the horror. The parents look up and they see that this massive crow is holding their baby's two beautiful brown eyeballs right in its beak.
Plucked right out.
The child is still alive, thrashing and squealing in terror, having just had its eyes harshly and recklessly plucked from its skull. The mother is screaming, the father tries to lunge and capture the bird, but the crow swiftly escapes out the open window, fluttering into the night with the stolen eyes.
It is a deeply unsettling scene, and it establishes the core operational tactic of Edward Zipper. We learn that this crow is not a natural animal, but Zipper himself, a being described as a shape-shifting predator of opportunity.
But why the eyes?
That's the critical question. Why target a newborn baby? Why this specific horrific mutilation?
In the dystopia lore, the eyes of an innocent newborn child hold a very literal, pure innocence.
Because they haven't seen anything bad yet. Exactly. They cannot be tainted by any evil, because the child has not yet experienced the evils of the world. Their perception is entirely uncorrupted. Zipper isn't stealing these eyes out of random malice or sadism. He is harvesting a highly specific, magically potent commodity.
He needs that untainted purity because he doesn't possess a single drop of his own. And what he does with these eyes tells us everything about his character. He flies back to his hidden den.
Which sounds lovely.
Oh, it's terrible. This place is described as a dark, damp, musky cavern hidden deep within a forest of poisonous thorns and black vines. It's a place that literally breathes with despair. He takes these innocent brown eyes and drops them into a glass jar filled with an unknown, glowing liquid.
Just another ingredient for him.
Yeah, he puts that jar on a dusty shelf right next to pickled animal parts, fermented roots, and other dead ingredients.
He categorizes them alongside dead skull components.
Yeah.
He treats a living, innocent consciousness as nothing more than a battery for his own use.
Exactly. But here is the twist. The eyes aren't dead, they remain entirely alive.
Which is horrifying.
The magic of the liquid, or perhaps the innate magic of the pure eyes themselves, keeps them fully conscious. They sit on that spellcaster's shelf for years, decades even, silently observing everything Zipper does.
Just watching.
They watch him cast spells, they watch him mix potions, they absorb his entire repository of knowledge. They are completely paralyzed, unable to scream, unable to blink, but they're taking in absolutely everything.
It takes the mythical concept of the all-seeing eye and twists it into this tragic narrative of silent captivity. The eyes become a captive audience to the villain's dark arts.
It's so creepy.
But what Zipper fails to realize, and this is a remarkably common blind spot for parasitic personalities, is that by keeping the eyes alive to preserve their magical potency, he is inadvertently educating them.
Oh, wow.
He is providing his victim with a front row seat to his entire magical repertoire. This is a crucial, arrogant mistake. It shows that Zipper's power is entirely transactional and inherently flawed. He uses others' resources without understanding the long-term consequences of his hoarding.
That makes a lot of sense.
If we think about this in a real-world context, it's akin to an abusive leader who steals the ideas of their subordinates, keeping those subordinates trapped in low-level positions to continuously harvest their talent. The leader thinks they are just extracting a resource, failing to realize that the subordinate is learning all the flaws, all the weaknesses, and all the inner workings of the operation while they sit silently in the background.
That is a brilliant parallel. He thinks he just has a magical battery on his shelf, but he actually has a spy soaking up all his secrets. He's building his own Trojan horse.
Completely by accident.
Now, that eye theft is the inciting incident for the night, or JSTR. But we have to look at Zipper's second monumental theft, which brings our third main character into the picture, the White Raven Crow.
Another innocent target.
And to really grasp the weight of this, we need to understand how raven crows work in this specific lore. It is not like the crows you and I see scavenging in the real world. In dystopia, to the eyes of other species, like humans, mammals, reptiles, raven crows look pitch black. The blackness is so deep it seems to absorb all ambient light.
Like a void.
But when they are in the sun, to the eyes of another raven crow, their feathers actually shine with this glorious, vibrant aura of rainbow light and golden pulsation. It is a hidden, majestic, multidimensional beauty that only they can perceive among their own kind.
It's a beautiful metaphor for intrinsic value versus perceived value, isn't it?
Totally.
To the rest of the world, the raven crow is just a dark, ordinary bird. In many cultures, a dark omen. But in its own reality, surrounded by its community and bathed in the light, it is a creature of radiant color. It possesses a hidden magic that is tied intimately to light, connection, and its own internal truth. It suggests that our true selves are often only visible to those who truly understand our nature.
So we have this recently matured raven crow. He's sitting perched high up on a branch, soaking in the sun's rays. He is meditating in the light, glowing with this golden rainbow aura, his wings spread wide, ready to take his first real flight into adulthood.
A very peaceful image.
It's a moment of profound peace and transition. He has no idea there are predators out there that hunt for magic. He is completely at peace. And then he steps forward off the branch to fly, and his wings are instantly slammed shut.
Ambushed.
He is trapped in a thick, sticky, magical webbing. He cries out for help, courage, courage. But he has matured, he's out of the nest, his parents are gone, and no help is coming. He drops to the forest floor, face to face with his captor, Edward Zipper.
Notice the pattern continuing. Just like with the sleeping baby, Zipper targets a creature in a moment of utter vulnerability and peaceful transition.
Right as they are about to move forward in life.
Exactly. The baby was sleeping on the eve of its naming ceremony. The crow is meditating, just about to take its first independent adult flight. Zipper cannot win a fair fight. He relies entirely on ambush, entrapment, and exploiting moments of peaceful unawareness. He doesn't target the guarded. He specifically targets the innocent and the untethered.
Zipper drags the trapped bird down to the forest floor and violently shoves it into a handmade cage of wood and thick ropes, and then he begins this dark ritual. Zipper lights a small fire. He starts singing, chanting, dancing, aggressively kicking up dust around the flames.
Putting on a show.
The trapped crow is watching this bizarre, terrifying display in absolute panic. And then Zipper conjures a magic breeze that blows right through the wooden cage. And the visual description here is stunning. As the breeze hits the bird, the glorious rainbow colors physically detach from the feathers.
They just peel off.
It looks like shimmering dust. The particles of color rip away from the bird, separating from its physical form, and flow like a glittering stream straight into the fire and then directly into Edward Zipper himself.
It is a literal extraction of identity.
Yeah.
Zipper is not just killing the bird for food or resources. He is stealing its essence, its magical signature.
Leaving nothing behind.
The visual of the color being stripped away, leaving the bird pure white, is incredibly stark. The white bird is left as a blank canvas, stripped of its heritage, its community identifier, and its natural camouflage.
It's a violation.
If we relate this to psychological abuse, this is the narcissist who doesn't just want to control you, but actively wants to drain your vibrance. They want your charisma, your empathy, your light, leaving you feeling hollowed out, blank, and unrecognizable to yourself.
When the very last particle of color is sucked away, the bird is left completely, starkly white. And what does Zipper do with this stolen rainbow essence? He weaves it into a magic black-feathered cloak.
A disguise.
When he wears this cloak, it grants him the shape-shifting abilities of the raven crow. It allows him to fly, and crucially, it grants him a form of magical invisibility, allowing him to hide from the prey he hunts. He stole the bird's identity to build a disguise for himself so he can perpetrate more thefts.
This brings us back to the core analysis of Zipper. He does not create anything. He is entirely void of original magic or innate power. He fashions his entire identity out of the stolen purity of others.
Just a parasite.
The innocent eyes give him foresight or magical components. The vibrant colors give him shape-shifting and stealth. He is a patchwork of stolen lives. He is the ultimate imposter.
But here is the critical flaw in his plan, and the lore makes a major point to highlight this. Zipper makes another massive unintended mistake during this ritual. Because he forcefully stole the crow's colors and wore them as a cloak, he inadvertently bound their fates together.
The magic is still connected.
The magic is still technically connected to its original host, the White Crow. Because of this magical tether, the now pure white Raven Crow suddenly shares Zipper's shape-shifting magic. The spellcaster accidentally empowered his own victim.
What's fascinating here is how the mechanics of theft in this universe backfire on the thief. Zipper thinks he is just extracting a raw material, treating the crow's magic like mining for coal.
Digging it up and taking it away.
But magic in dystopia is living. It is tied to consciousness and identity. By ripping the colors away, he didn't sever the connection. He just stretched it across a distance. He created a quantum entanglement of sorts between himself and the White Crow.
Tying them together forever.
He tied himself to the consciousness of the being he violated. And this sets the stage perfectly for the crow's eventual retaliation. The trauma, the violation, actually becomes the source of a new, highly potent defensive power.
The trauma doesn't destroy the crow. It alters its trajectory and inadvertently gives it a new set of tools. Which brings us to the next phase of this story, where we see how these two victims, the Blind Knight and the White Crow, eventually cross paths.
The paths were always going to converge.
Let's look at how the White Crow is living its new life. It has relocated. It is now perched high up in the branches of the DMT trees. Now, I need to pause here because the lore drops the term DMT trees, and we really need to unpack what that means in the context of dystopia. These are massive, weeping, willow-like trees that dominate certain landscapes.
Yes, and the naming is highly intentional. In the real world, DMT is a powerful psychedelic compound known for inducing profound, reality-altering hallucinations, often described as ego death, or confronting the deepest parts of one's subconscious.
Very intense stuff.
Very. In the dystopia lore, these trees exude a sap or pollen that has a similar metaphysical property. They are massive, ancient organisms that literally process the psychic trauma of the ecosystem. Creatures drawn to the DMT trees are often those seeking profound shifts in perspective, or those who have had their physical reality shattered.
Like the White Crow?
It is a place of intense mental processing. So for the White Crow to take refuge here is incredibly symbolic. It has lost its physical identity, its colors, and so it retreats to an environment that forces it to navigate the inner hallucinatory realms of consciousness. It's a place of healing, but a very intense, challenging kind of healing.
That makes perfect sense. So the White Crow is living in these mind-bending trees. It has grown. It is larger, stronger, more hardened. It uses its new size and its stark white form to effortlessly snap little nuisance birds right out of the air. It has adapted to its new reality.
It's surviving.
It hasn't become evil, but it has become a survivor. Meanwhile, the child whose eyes were stolen has also grown up. He learned to navigate the world without sight, using sound, vibration, and air currents. He became an incredible acrobat and a fierce warrior, eventually earning the title of Sir J STR, a highly respected knight, serving the Lord of Brassingtown.
He took his absolute vulnerability and forged it into physical mastery.
Both the bird and the boy found ways to overcompensate for their massive losses. They didn't let the theft end their stories, they let it define their adaptations.
Which is incredibly resilient to both of them.
So, Sir J STR and a band of his loyal knights are out on an expedition. They are resting near the edge of the dark forest. The men are relaxed. And suddenly, the sky above them goes pitch black. It is not a storm cloud. It is a massive, unnatural flock of thousands upon thousands of black raven crows.
Zipper's stolen form.
The air fills with the deafening sound of flapping wings and shrieking caws. It is a dense, dark mass of impending doom. And without any warning, these crows dive-bomb the knights. They fall from the sky like feathered arrows, hitting with such force that their beaks pierce right through the knights' metal armor.
That is terrifying.
And their specific target is horrifying. They are actively stealing the eyeballs of the men. It is a targeted, vicious mutilation, echoing exactly what happened to Sir J STR as a baby.
This attack is clearly orchestrated. Whether directly commanded by Zipper or manifested by the dark energy of the forest reacting to J STR's presence, the dark forces are using the natural form of the Raven Crow, the very form Zipper stole and corrupted, to enact terror.
It's a psychological attack as much as a physical one.
For Sir J STR, this must be a moment of profound, paralyzing psychological horror. The nightmare of his infancy, the story his parents must have told him 1,000 times, is manifesting in reality, happening to his loyal brotherhood right in front of him.
And he can't even see it happening.
He is blind, relying on sound, and all he can hear are his men screaming in the exact same way he must have screamed as an infant. He's yelling commands, trying to get his men to form a shield wall, trying to use sound to fight back, but they are completely overwhelmed by the sheer volume and ferocity of the swarm.
It is absolute chaos and carnage. But watching this horror unfold, looking down from its perch high up in the DMT tree, is our white raven crow.
The observer.
The white crow sees these black crows, the exact species whose identity was used by Zipper to violate it, attacking these innocent men. And instead of flying away, instead of protecting its hard-won safety in the trees, a new strength grows inside it. It feels a profound compulsion to intervene.
It steps up.
It leaps from the tree, falling toward the battlefield. And as it falls, it taps into that unintended shape-shifting magic it shares with Zipper. With a massive, booming puff of white smoke midair, the crow transforms into a giant white goose.
The choice of a goose here is brilliant on a tactical level. By transforming into a giant goose, the white crow isn't just getting bigger. It is adopting a form perfectly designed to scatter and intimidate a flock of smaller birds.
Because geese are mean.
Geese are territorial, aggressive, and incredibly loud. It's choosing the exact right avatar to disrupt the swarm.
And it doesn't just use its size. The white crow lets out this deep, hollow, bass tone honk. It is so loud, so reverberating that it acts like a concussive sound wave.
Yep.
It physically shatters the coordinated flight patterns of the black crows.
Breaking their formation.
The giant white goose lands right in the middle of the melee, squashing the black crows under its webbed feet, pecking at them, and literally eating the corrupted black crows whole to save the knights.
Oh.
It is an absolute force of nature, and it completely turns the tide of the battle, driving the dark swarm back into the sky.
This is a monumental moment of retaliation and growth. The white crow is using the magic born from its own victimization to interrupt the victimization of others.
It's refusing to let this cycle continue.
It recognizes a kinship in the suffering of the knights. It sees a cycle of abuse happening and decides to become the wrench in the gears. And what happens next cements this profound alliance between these two broken beings.
Because the danger is far from over. The crows retreat, but Sir J STR and his newly blinded men are in agony. They are disoriented, bleeding, and in their panic, they stumble blindly into the boundaries of the dark forest.
The worst place they could go.
Now, we need to spend some time detailing this dark forest because it is essentially a living, breathing, psychological hellscape. It is a labyrinth of thick, black, poisonous vines covered in massive razor-sharp thorns. The ground isn't regular soil. It is made of this sickly, soft, yellow dirt.
And it reacts to them.
The forest itself is reactive. It senses movement, but more importantly, it senses despair. The vines physically reach out to grab you, tearing at your flesh, pumping you full of toxins. But these toxins don't just poison your body. They induce severe artificial depression and hopelessness.
A literal manifestation of despair.
The lore states that the forest pumps out an ashy, heavy gas that makes you breathe in the putrid stench of bad luck. It is designed to chemically make you give up, lay down, and rot into the yellow dirt.
The dark forest is a phenomenal allegory for clinical depression and the paralyzing nature of unhealed trauma. The despair gas perfectly mirrors the cognitive distortion that happens during a severe depressive episode.
That feeling that it's never going to get better.
It's that heavy, suffocating feeling that convinces you that your current darkness is permanent, that fighting is pointless, and that you are fundamentally unlucky or doomed. Sir J STR and his men, having just suffered this horrific mass mutilation, are incredibly vulnerable to this environment.
Their defenses are completely gone.
Their psychological defenses are shattered. The despair gas amplifies their shock and profound loss, creeping into their minds and convincing them that there is no way out.
It's terrifying. Sir J STR is crawling through these reactive black vines, getting sliced to ribbons. He is suffocating on the despair gas, losing his grip on reality, about to give up entirely. He collapses onto the sickly yellow dirt, weeping, feeling totally abandoned by the universe.
But he's not alone.
But high above, far outside the toxic canopy of the forest, the white raven crow wakes up from a slumber in the DMT tree in an absolute panic. Because of that magical tether, or perhaps a new spiritual bond forged in the battle they just shared, the crow actually senses its friend's distress.
They are connected now.
It knows Sir JSTR is dying in that forest, and once again, it doesn't hesitate to leave its sanctuary. The crow leaps into the air, flies incredibly high into the sky, and nosedives straight down toward the dense canopy of the dark forest, picking up massive speed. Just before it smashes into the poisonous vines, boom! Another puff of white smoke. It transforms into a giant white mole.
Again, we see the strategic, adaptive use of the shape-shifting magic. The crow knows it cannot fight the vines from the air, and it cannot walk through them on the surface. The forest is too dense, the thorns too thick, the gas too concentrated.
It has to go under.
It has to bypass the forest's psychological and physical defenses entirely by going underneath them. It subverts the environment.
So this giant white mole hits the soft yellow dirt and starts digging like the ground is made of water. It is tunneling deep beneath the poisonous roots, bypassing the toxic gas completely. And the detail here is so incredibly poetic. The mole is navigating through the pitch-black underground, and it is guided specifically by the salty smell of Sir JSTR's tears.
Following the grief.
Sir JSTR's weeping has dripped down through the surface and softened the earth, leaving a scent trail of sorrow deep into the ground. The mole follows that exact scent, burrowing past the rotting roots until it breaks through the surface right exactly where Sir JSTR has collapsed.
A rescue mission fueled by pain.
The ground cracks open, the massive white mole pops up, and they make a profound spiritual connection. The mole rapidly widens the hole, allowing JSTR and his surviving blinded men to drop down, escaping the toxic surface and entering the safe subterranean tunnels.
If we look closely at the thematic weight of this alliance, it is incredibly moving. Both the knight and the crow were brutally mutilated and robbed by Edward Zipper. Zipper took their defining physical traits, the knight's sight, the crow's vibrant colors.
They both lost a piece of themselves.
By all accounts, the dark forest should claim them. They have every right and every reason to succumb to the despair gas. Yet, instead of letting their mutilation define them as permanent victims, they combine their remaining faculties.
The knight's tears and the crow's magic.
The knight has his vulnerability, his tears, which he doesn't hide but lets fall, inadvertently creating a beacon. The crow have the unintended shape-shifting magic born from its own trauma. They literally dig each other out of the darkness.
Think about a time you had something massive taken from you, whether it was an opportunity, a crucial relationship, or your fundamental sense of security. It is so easy to let that loss define you. It's so easy to let the despair gas of your own dark forest convince you that you are permanently diminished and that you should just lay down in the yellow dirt.
It's the path of least resistance.
But look at what the lore is teaching us here. The crow uses the very magic born of its trauma to protect others. The knight uses his raw, unfiltered pain as a signal for help. It is a powerful reminder that our deepest wounds can become the very tools we use to survive and help others navigate their own dark periods.
Precisely. And by tunneling under the forest, they are refusing to play by the rules of the despair-inducing environment. They are finding a third option when the world only presents them with fight or die. And this underground journey eventually leads them directly to the heart of the problem.
Which brings us to the next massive turning point in the lore. The knights, led by the giant white mole, have dug a massive network of tunnels deep beneath the dark forest. They eventually break through a solid wall of packed earth into a hidden, darkened den.
They found him.
They don't know it yet, but they have just breached the subterranean secret lair of Edward Zipper, hidden underneath a massive dead tree in the exact center of the forest. Now, let's rewind slightly to see what Zipper was doing right before the wall collapsed.
Oh, this is great.
Zipper is pacing around his den. He has these magical purple crystal fragments scattered on his table. He is peering through them, using them to spy on the outside world. And through the crystals, he sees that the king of the realm has warned Sir JSTR in a dream, and he sees that the knights are organized, angry, and actively hunting him.
This is where the curtains pulled back on the true nature of Edward Zipper, and by extension, the true nature of parasitic evil.
He's not so tough now.
He is supposedly this terrifying, legendary spellcaster who has terrorized the realm for decades. He has hoarded magic, stolen identities, and built an empire of fear.
Yeah.
But the absolute second he realizes that his victims are no longer passive, that they are organized and actively coming for him, his entire facade completely and instantly crumbles.
He goes into a total frantic panic. The text actually gives us his pathetic inner monologue. He is pacing around his den, sweating, muttering to himself, The owner is coming. He's coming for his eyes upon my shelf. No defense. He knows everything else. Yes, yes, no
No
defense.
defense.
He is terrified because he finally realizes the massive mistake he made. Those innocent brown eyes sitting in the glowing liquid on his shelf for years have been watching him. They have seen every spell, every incantation, every weakness.
The Trojan horse activates.
Sir J STR, through his innate connection to his stolen eyes, now possesses all of Zipper's knowledge. Zipper literally admits he has no defense. So what does this big, bad, terrifying spellcaster do? He completely abandons his lair. He frantically shoves his stolen trinkets, his spell books, and his jars into canvas carry sacks.
It is the ultimate defining display of cowardice. He doesn't set magical traps. He doesn't stand his ground to defend his home. He doesn't even attempt to negotiate or fight. He just packs his bags to run away.
He's just gone.
It perfectly illustrates how bullies and exploiters operate. Their power relies entirely on the submission and silence of their victims. When the victim stands up, the exploiter has no actual internal fortitude to draw upon.
Yeah.
But he does leave one thing behind, and it is a very calculated, incredibly cowardly move.
Yes. As he's fleeing, he intentionally takes the single glass jar containing Sir J STR's living eyes and places it right on the doorstep of the den. He calls it a seed. He leaves his most prized, stolen possession there as a distraction, a trap, a cowardly backup plan to buy himself a few extra minutes while he flees through a hidden back tunnel to a wooden raft waiting on an underground river. He abandons his prize just to save his own skin.
Classic Zipper.
So Zipper flees into the tunnels. Meanwhile, Sir J STR and his blind men have broken into the den from below. They are fumbling around in the dark, smashing into furniture, and then the king of the realm intervenes.
The cavalry arrives.
From far away, the king conjures a massive rolling ball of thundering, cracking wind. It rolls through the dark forest like a freight train, ripping the poisonous black vines to shreds, purifying the air, and blasts straight into the massive dead tree, ripping the heavy wooden doors right off Zipper's den.
The king's wind isn't just a destructive physical force. It is a manifestation of divine intervention clearing the accumulated darkness.
Letting the light in.
By ripping the doors off, the wind shatters the isolation of the den and allows pure, unadulterated sunlight to flood into this dark, festering cavern for the first time in decades. And that glorious sunlight hits the glass jar sitting right on the doorstep.
The liquid in the jar begins to glow with this warm, pulsating, intensely yellow light. The blinded knights, who are starving, dehydrated, and traumatized from their journey through the forest, are drawn to the light and the liquid in the jar. They stumble toward it, desperately trying to drink the magical liquid, hallucinating that their sight is returning.
But JSTR knows better.
Sir J STR knows better. The voice of the king whispers into his mind, telling him what is truly in that jar. Sir J STR pushes past his men. He creeps toward the glowing glass. He feels his way forward, his hands shaking, bringing his empty eye sockets right over the top of the glass.
The reunion?
And the moment his face is near, the eyes physically leap out of the jar. They fly upward through the air and grip his face tightly. The narrative describes a brief, violently chaotic struggle as J STR smashes backward into the wooden furniture in absolute shock, but then the eyes settle deep back into his empty sockets. They are finally home.
It is a visceral, almost aggressive reunion. The eyes don't just gently float back into place, they leap with desperation. They've been waiting for this exact moment for decades, trapped on a shelf. And the restoration of his sight is not just a physical healing, it is a massive flood of integration.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The moment the eyes settle into his skull and connect with his nervous system, Sir J STR doesn't just get his normal human vision back.
He gets everything they saw.
A massive, overwhelming flood of memories rushes directly into his brain. He suddenly remembers everything the eyes witnessed while sitting on that shelf for all those years. He absorbs decades of magical knowledge, every spell Zipper cast, every potion he mixed, every secret he mumbled to himself in the dark.
The ultimate download.
The horrific trauma of the childhood theft is instantly transmuted into an incredible, world-altering advantage. He gains enhanced magical sight. The lore notes that the sheer brightness of the world hurts him at first, but then he is overwhelmed by colored beauty, seeing spectrums and magical auras that no normal human could ever see. He instantly becomes vastly more powerful than the coward who robbed him.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this moment perfectly encapsulates the lore's underlying philosophy on evil and trauma. Evil, as represented by Zipper, is inherently fragile, parasitic, and short-sighted. It thrives only in the shadows, exploiting the innocent for immediate gain.
It's all short-term for him.
But the moment it is forced to stand its ground, or the moment the victim manages to reclaim their skull and power, the evil completely crumbles. Zipper's greedy hoarding of the eyes was the exact mechanism of his own undoing.
He caused his own defeat.
He thought he was keeping a neat little magical trophy, but he was actually holding on to a recording device that was actively arming his nemesis with all his weaknesses. And look at Sir J STR's response. His confrontation of his trauma, physically walking up to the jar, enduring the violently chaotic reintegration of his sight, absorbing the painful memories of the den, stands in stark, beautiful contrast to Zipper's pathetic avoidance and fleeing.
It's beautiful. JSTR faces the pain head-on to become whole, while Zipper runs away from the pain and loses absolutely everything, which leads us perfectly into the final, pathetic chapter of our villain.
I've been waiting for this part.
While JSTR is regaining his sight and his power, surrounded by sunlight, let's check in on our fleeing coward. Zipper is escaping through a dark, dripping underground tunnel that leads to a subterranean river. But this isn't a nice, sparkling, romantic stream.
Not at all.
He is floating down a rapidly cascading river of murky, foul, intensely fecal-smelling water on a tiny, precarious wooden raft. He is staring up at the dark stone ceiling, completely frozen with fear, surrounded by his canvas sacks of stolen trinkets.
The environment perfectly reflects his internal state. He is completely surrounded by rot, waste, and darkness, navigating a rapid, out-of-control descent that he has absolutely no power over. The master manipulator is finally at the total mercy of the elements.
The rapids start to grow incredibly violent. The murky water is churning, crashing over the sides of the tiny raft. Zipper is desperately clinging to the wood. And then a massive, towering wall of this thick, murky muck crashes down on him, and the raft violently flips over.
Nature taking over.
Zipper is thrown face first into the churning depths. And here's where the fatal flaw of his stolen magic finally, definitively catches up to him. He is wearing the black feathered cloak, the magical cloak he wove from the White Crow's stolen rainbow colors.
The disguise.
But the cloak isn't meant for swimming in fecal muck. It acts like a massive sponge. It rapidly soaks up the heavy, muddy, dense water. The magic-soaked feathers become a literal lead weight, wrapping tightly around his body, dragging Zipper down, straight to the bottom of the murky river to drown.
This is a phenomenal, deeply satisfying piece of poetic justice. The very disguise he built to hide his cowardice, the stolen power he relied on to elevate himself above others and hide from consequence, becomes the exact, literal instrument of his downfall.
It's what kills him almost.
The weight of his sins quite literally drags him under the water. He cannot sustain the false identity when the environment turns hostile. It's a perfect metaphor for people who build their lives on lies and stolen valor. The moment they hit the turbulent waters of a real crisis, the heavy, waterlogged weight of their fake persona is what drowns them.
So what is Zipper's final, desperate act? To save his own life from drowning in the muck, he realizes he has to abandon the cloak. He frantically claws at his own neck, stripping off the heavy, black-feathered magic cloak, leaving it to sink deep into the mud of the riverbed.
He gives it all up.
He completely abandons his power, his disguise, his entire stolen identity. He kicks his way up and floats to the surface, completely naked, freezing cold, and stripped of all his magic. He washes up into a shallow, muddy creek. But nature isn't done with him yet.
My favorite part.
The moment his naked body washes into the shallows, a group of emotionless, industrious beavers immediately descend on him. Before he can even catch his breath or stand up, they start piling heavy sticks, logs, mud, and twigs right on top of him.
Just building right over him.
They literally bury him alive, building the foundation of their dam right over his body, pinning him down in the freezing water. The lore states that he survives only by desperately snapping his jaws at raw fish that leap upstream and get trapped in the dam with him. He is stuck there, buried alive for thousands of days. It is an incredibly undignified, pathetic end.
The symbolism here is incredibly dense and satisfying. When Zipper sheds his false identity to survive, he is reduced to his true, fundamental state. Naked, powerless, cold, and entirely parasitic.
He's just a bug under a log.
And it is highly significant that it is the beavers that imprison him. Beavers are creatures of nature, builders, organisms that work in complete harmony with their environment to create habitats. Nature itself recognizes the parasite and neutralizes it.
They don't even care about him, they just use him.
Zipper thought he could control and exploit the natural world through theft, but the natural world ultimately uses him as nothing more than structural foundation for a dam. He is trapped in a purgatory of his own making, serving a purpose for others while suffering completely alone.
And while Zipper is rotting under a pile of sticks, something miraculous happens back in the river. Let's look at what happens to that discarded cloak. The heavy, magic-soaked cloak hits the absolute bottom of the murky, dead riverbed.
And it's full of magic.
And because it is completely saturated with decades of concentrated, stolen magical energy from the crow, the impact releases a massive concussive wave of rich, potent minerals and raw magic directly into the dead soil. The environmental impact is instantaneous.
An explosion of life.
The sudden release of this hoarded magic causes the murky, dead riverbanks above to immediately burst into life. Lush, blooming green meadows explode out of the mud where there was only rot and decay moments before.
We really need to pause and look at this, because it is a beautiful illustration of the conservation of magical energy within the dystopia universe. We can think of it almost like thermodynamics.
Energy just changing forms.
Energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transferred. Zipper hoarded this magical energy, keeping it stagnant, trapped in a cloak, using it only for his own vanity and concealment. By hoarding it, he created a localized drought of magic, which is why his surroundings, the dark forest, the dead tree, the murky river, were so toxic and decaying.
He was a black hole for magic.
When he finally strips the cloak off and the magic is released back into the ecosystem, the earth eagerly reclaims it. It instantly converts that stagnant hoarded magic into abundant, life-giving flora. It profoundly suggests that power is not inherently evil. It is the hoarding and selfish misuse of it that causes corruption and decay. Once the parasite is removed and the dam breaks, the environment heals itself instantly.
It's an incredible visual. The dead land just erupts into green. Which brings us to the grand finale. The narrative reaches its absolute glorious climax. Sir J STR, his sight fully restored and magically enhanced, leads his surviving knights and the White Raven Crow out of the tunnels of the dark forest.
Out into the light.
They emerge from the oppressive, toxic darkness into the bright, warm sunlight, right on the banks of the river where the meadows have just miraculously bloomed. They are taking in the beauty, feeling the sunlight hit their faces, breathing the fresh air. But the White Crow doesn't stop to rest.
The crow's deep instincts kick in. It senses that its stolen essence is near. The magic that was just released by the cloak into the riverbed is vibrating, calling out to its original rightful owner.
The White Crow charges straight toward the rushing water. It flies high up into the bright blue sky, hovers for a split second, taking aim, and then nosedives straight down toward the surface of the river, picking up massive terminal speed.
The final dive.
And just like it did when it turned into a mole to dig through the dirt, it uses that unintended shape-shifting magic one last crucial time. With a massive puff of white mist mid-dive, the crow transforms into a massive, giant white carp.
Adapting to the element.
It hits the water with a heavy splash, diving deep down into the rushing violent currents. The giant white carp swims down into the murky, muddy, pitch-black depths of the river. It is fighting the enclosing walls of mud, pushing through the dark clouds of silt swirling around it, trying to trap it.
It's a struggle.
But it pushes through the darkness, swimming deeper into the foulness, until its scales finally brush against something hidden deep in the muck. It touches the sunken, discarded black cloak that still holds the core remnants of its stolen colors.
This specific action requires immense heroism. We have to remember the context. This river is murky, foul, fast-moving, and terrifying. The crow is a creature of the sky, a creature of the sun and the air.
It doesn't belong down there.
Yet to regain its true identity, it must willingly transform into a water creature and dive into the dark, suffocating, freezing depths of the mud. It is a profound, undeniable metaphor for the deep internal work of the healing process.
Exactly. And the moment the white carp connects with the cloak, the magic instantly recognizes its true original master. The carp drives upward with immense explosive force. It rockets toward the surface of the water, and with an almighty, earth-shaking boom and a blinding flash of brilliant, warm light, it bursts from the surface of the river.
Breaking through.
And the visual payoff here is just spectacular. As the mist clears and the water droplets fall back to the river, the bird hovering in the air is no longer a stark white crow. It is no longer a giant white carp. It is a radiant, majestic raven crow. The bright sun hits its feathers and they shimmer and explode with every glorious color of the rainbow, fully restored, brighter and more vibrant than they ever were before the theft.
This raises an important question, perhaps the most important question of the entire narrative, about what it truly takes to heal from a deep, foundational violation. Look at the stark contrast between our two central characters in their final moments with the magic.
They handled it completely differently.
When the stolen magic became heavy and difficult in the muck, Edward Zipper immediately stripped it off and abandoned it. He ran away from the discomfort, completely losing his identity and his freedom in the process. But the white crow did the exact opposite. It deliberately transformed and swam into the muck.
It went toward the pain.
It faced the suffocating darkness of the riverbed, specifically to reclaim the parts of itself that were lost. Didn't shy away from the ugly, heavy, foul reality of where its trauma lay.
So what does this all mean for us sitting here in the real world listening to this?
It means that true restoration, true foundational healing, rarely happens in the sunlight. You cannot reclaim your fully realized, vibrant self by avoiding the messy, painful, murky parts of your history. You have to be willing to dive into the depths, confront the pain, and physically pull your identity out of the mud.
That's hard work.
The crow's willingness to face the absolute darkness of the river is the exact mechanism that allowed it to emerge as a creature of brilliant, multidimensional light. The colors were always theirs. They belonged to the bird. They just had to be brave enough to go into the dark to get them back.
That is incredibly powerful. And that brings us to the end of our journey today. Let's take a moment to summarize this incredible dichotomy we've just explored. On one hand, we have Edward Zipper, the ultimate coward.
A truly pathetic figure.
A being with no innate power who chose to steal the purity of a baby's eyes and the radiant colors of an innocent bird just to build a fake, shape-shifting identity for himself. And in the end, that very stolen power, that false identity, became the literal weight that dragged him down into the muck, leaving him to be buried alive and forgotten by the very natural world he tried to exploit.
Swept away.
On the other hand, we have the White Raven Crow and Sir J STR. Innocent creatures who were violently violated. But instead of letting that trauma turn them into permanent victims, they use their scars and the unintended magic born of that trauma to protect others, to dig each other out of the dark forests, and ultimately to bravely dive into the deepest, darkest waters to reclaim their true, radiant colors.
It is a masterful narrative about the absolute resilience of the soul. And as we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, applying this lore directly to your own life. Consider the cloaks we all wear in our daily lives. Think about the identities, the professional titles, the emotional armors we borrow or sometimes even steal to protect ourselves from the judgment of the world. If you were thrown into the violent rapids of a real crisis tomorrow, would that cloak save you? Or would it be the very weight that drags you down to the bottom? And if you had to strip all of that artificial armor away just to survive, what true colors are waiting at the bottom of the river for you to finally dive down, face the muck, and reclaim?
Wow, that is a thought that will stick with me for a long time. Thank you so much for joining us on this custom-tailored deep dive into the extraordinary world of dystopia. We hope this exploration has given you a shortcut to the profound psychological insights hidden within this lore. Keep questioning, keep exploring the narratives that shape our understanding of the world, and most importantly, never be afraid to dive deep into your own murky waters. We'll catch you next time.